Welcome back to the SES Sentinel of the Stars. I'm your captain, and we are currently orbiting Martar Bay. Below us, the cyborgs themselves have built strongholds. We're sending Republic Defender 78 down to scout for a LIDAR station in order to upload these pirated historical briefings. We're currently working our way through a deep dive on the United States Congress. We last left off with establishing the 5 individuals that would shape the framing of the Constitution.
Sir? About that. If I could ask a question.
Go ahead, Helldiver.
Well, sir, as important as the Committee of 5 were, can you provide some background on the man they elected president? Who was Peyton Randolph anyway?
Fair question. Since we want to be thorough, I think it's only fitting that we take a closer look at a number of the people that shaped the age. Nova, what do we have on Peyton Randolph?
Retrieving historical dossier on Peyton Randolph, Captain.
While Nova does that, let's get you prepped for the dive. Looks like we're waiting on a new major order from High Command, so we should have less chatter on the airwaves.
Captain, I'm running some static noise in the background, but there have been questions as to why deep historical information is being shared by a Helldiver on a combat channel. Until we can mask the signal, it would be best if you provided the briefing on your private channel.
We're going to end up decommissioned, but the people need to know as much as they can.
I'm on the ground and have an all clear, ready to receive the report.
Understood, Helldiver. Keep your head down and see if you can't find a spot to upload data. Profile and influence. Peyton Randolph was a moderate, stabilizing force in the early revolutionary movement. Born into Virginia's wealthiest political dynasty, he was a cousin to Thomas Jefferson and a close associate of George Washington. His presence in Philadelphia lent immense legal and social legitimacy to the colonial cause. Unlike the radical firebrands of the era, Randolph was known for his methodical approach to governance. He was a prominent attorney, educated at the College of William and Mary in the Middle Temple in London. Despite British authorities eventually placing him on a radical watch list, contemporaries like Patrick Henry often felt Randolph moved too cautiously.
Captain, you mentioned that he ended up on a watch list. What organization was used to spy on American colonists on behalf of the Crown? Did they have ministries, like we do?
Captain, unlike modern governments, the British Crown did not have a single, centralized organization, like a colonial-era MI6 or CIA, dedicated to spying on the American colonists. Instead, espionage was highly decentralized and relied on 3 main avenues.
British secret intelligence. British commanders in North America ran their own localized intelligence operations. General Sir Henry Clinton formalized this network in 1779 by appointing Major John Andre as the head of British secret intelligence, sometimes referred to as the Secret Service in America. Operating largely out of occupied New York City, Andre managed a vast network of informants and served as the primary handler for Benedict Arnold's treason. Loyalist spy rings. The Crown leaned heavily on American colonists who remained loyal to Britain. Because loyalists blended perfectly into colonial society, they were the ultimate intelligence asset. The Board of Associated Loyalists, chartered in 1780 and headed by William Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's loyalist son. This organization was officially a paramilitary group, but actively served as an intelligence gathering hub for the British. Informal networks. Much of the daily intelligence came from ad hoc spies, particularly women and enslaved individuals, whose movements were frequently underestimated or ignored by patriotic forces. The Black Chamber. A cornerstone of British espionage was the use of Black Chamber operations. British authorities would systematically intercept mail moving through the postal system, covertly breaking the seals, transcribe the contents for intelligence on patriot activities, and then reseal and forward letters to the colonists, remained unaware that they were being monitored.
Benjamin Franklin's son fought for England against his own father? How did that happen?
What's the story there, Nova?
Captain, accessing historical database on the Board of Associated Loyalists. The board was born out of ideological loyalty, but its operations were heavily driven by vengeance. It serves as a prime example of the brutal, neighbor-against-neighbor civil war that occurred alongside the broader American Revolution.
Origins and leadership. The board was officially chartered in late 1780 in British-occupied New York City. It was founded and directed by William Franklin, the 13th and final royal governor of New Jersey and the illegitimate son of founding father Benjamin Franklin. William Franklin's motivations were intensely personal, and after refusing to recognize the new Patriot government, he was arrested in 1776 and imprisoned in Connecticut under brutal conditions. He spent months in solitary confinement in a cell meant for condemned men. Suffered severe health deterioration, losing his hair and teeth, and his wife died while he was incarcerated. Upon his release in 1778, upon his release in a 1778 prisoner exchange, Franklin relocated to New York and lobbied the British command to allow him to organize a militant loyalist network to strike back. Structure and operations of this, while sanctioned by British authorities to give loyalists a legitimate status, the board operated as a loosely regulated, state-sponsored vigilante network. Intelligence gathering. As an intelligence hub, the board utilized displaced loyalists and possessed intimate knowledge of local geography, maritime routes, and patriot sympathizers. They established a fortified outpost, such as Fort Franklin on Long Island, to monitor movement and coordinate espionage. Guerrilla warfare. The board managed an estimated 400 armed associators. They waged a shadow war across New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York, conducting amphibious raids, seizing Patriot supplies, and burning coastal towns. Command friction. Franklin wanted to wage a ruthless war of attrition. This frequently put him at odds with the British Commander-in-Chief, General Henry Clinton, who preferred a more conventional, restrained approach and repeatedly tried to keep the board on a short leash. Sorry, Helldiver. The downfall, the Joshua Huddy effect. The board's autonomy ultimately caused its destruction. The partisan violence between Patriot militias and the associated loyalists frequently escalated into a cycle of retaliatory executions. In April 1782, following the murder of a loyalist named Philip White, troops operating under the board's oversight captured New Jersey Patriot militia captain Joshua Huddy. With William Franklin's approval, a loyalist officer named Richard Lippincott hanged Huddy on a beach in New Jersey, leaving a note pinned to his chest declaring, "Up goes Huddy for Philip White." The extrajudicial execution sparked a massive international crisis known as the Asgill Affair. George Washington threatened to execute a captive British officer in retaliation if the perpetrators were not handed over. The resulting diplomatic fallout forced the British command to formally strip the Board of Associated Loyalists of all its operational powers. Shortly after the board was dissolved in August 1782, William Franklin fled to London. He spent the rest of his life in exile and never reconciled with his father.
But Captain, how did the American Revolution cause the permanent estrangement of Benjamin and William Franklin? I mean, his son went full supervillain after his wife died, which is pretty wild.
Retrieving historical analysis, Captain. The estrangement of Benjamin and William Franklin is one of the most tragic personal subplots of the American Revolution. The rift was permanent because it was not merely a political disagreement. For Benjamin Franklin, William's loyalty to the crown was a profound personal betrayal. Benjamin had spent his life grooming his son for greatness, only to watch William use that very influence against the Patriot cause.
A fractured bond. Before the war, the two were inseparable. William was Benjamin's illegitimate son, but Benjamin raised him in his household. William was the one flying the kite with Benjamin during the famous 1752 electricity experiment. Benjamin later used his immense political leverage in London to secure William the position of Royal Governor of New Jersey in 1763. The ideological split happened slowly, then all at once. Benjamin, initially a staunch British imperialist, gradually realized that the crown would never treat the colonists as equal citizens. William, however, believed the British Empire was the greatest system of government on earth and that reforming it from within was the only logical path. He viewed the Patriot movement not as a noble struggle for liberty, but as an illegal, chaotic mob. The point of no return, their final meeting. In August 1775, Benjamin travels to William's estate in New Jersey in a tensed, emotional meeting. Benjamin pleads with William to resign his governorship and join the Patriot cause. William adamantly refuses, arguing that independence will lead to ruin. They never speak as father and son again. William's arrest comes in June 1776. The Patriot-led New Jersey Provincial Congress declares William an enemy to the liberties of this country. He is arrested and sent to solitary confinement in Connecticut. Despite being one of the most powerful men in the Continental Congress, Benjamin does absolutely nothing to help his son. The Board of Associated Loyalists, August 1782. Following the international scandal of the Joshua Huddy hanging, orchestrated by the Loyalist board William commanded, William flees to London in exile. His actions, leading to a violent guerrilla war against patriots, permanently cemented Benjamin's disgust. The final letter came in August 1784. William attempts to reconcile, writing to Benjamin in Paris. Benjamin responds coldly, stating that nothing had ever hurt him as much as William taking up arms against him. The reconciliation fails. The final insult. When Benjamin Franklin died in 1790, his will delivered a final, calculated blow from the grave. He left almost his entire vast estate to his daughter Sarah and his grandson Temple, William's illegitimate son, who Benjamin had raised in Paris during the war, effectively replacing William. To William, Benjamin left almost nothing. Some nearly worthless land in Nova Scotia and a few old books, adding the biting legal addendum, "The part he acted against me in the late war, which is of public notoriety, will account for my leaving him no more of an estate he endeavored to deprive me of."
Well, shit. So, was Peyton Randolph the first U.S. president?
I mean, technically there was no United States at the time. They still had a war to win. As far as why he wasn't in retrospect, Nova, what do we got?
Captain, it comes down to a massive difference in job descriptions and the timeline of American independence. Peyton Randolph was a crucial figure, but he was not a president in the modern sense, and the country he was representing didn't legally exist yet.
A different kind of president. In the 18th century, the word president simply meant the person who presided over a meeting or an assembly. Randolph's role in the Continental Congress was essentially that of a chairman or a modern-day Speaker of the House. His job was to moderate debates, enforce parliamentary rules, sign official correspondence on behalf of the body, and keep the frequently argumentative delegates in order. He had absolutely zero executive power. He couldn't veto legislation, he didn't command an army, and he didn't run a government apparatus. The timeline problem. Randolph served his brief tenures in 1774 and 1775. He died in October 1775, 8 months before the Declaration of Independence was signed. When Randolph was leading the Continental Congress, they were not a sovereign nation. They were an unauthorized assembly of delegates from British colonies trying to coordinate a unified response to the Crown. They were a subject of King George III, not citizens of the United States. The constitutional shift. The Continental Congress and the government under the subsequent Articles of Confederation operated entirely as a single-branch legislative body. They were terrified of creating a strong central executive because they had just fought a war to escape a king. It wasn't until the United States Constitution was ratified and went into effect in 1789 that the modern office of the President of the United States, the chief executive and head of state, was actually created. George Washington was the first person elected to fill that newly invented, highly powerful role.
So, what did Randolph do while in office? So to speak?
I get you. Here's a quick rundown. Key milestones. He was appointed Attorney General in 1748. He assumes the role of the Crown's Attorney General for Virginia, balancing royal duties with colonial legal interests. He's elected the Speaker of the House of Burgesses in 1766, resigns as Attorney General to lead the House of Burgesses, steering Virginia's legislative resistance to British taxation. Elected to the first President of the Continental Congress, September 5th, 1774, unanimously chosen to preside over the first Continental Congress in Philadelphia, he initiates the enduring tradition of opening congressional sessions with a prayer. Re-elected as President May 10, 1775, returns to head the Second Continental Congress but resigns 2 weeks later due to failing health, yielding the presidency to John Hancock. Death in office, October 22, 1775. Dies suddenly of a stroke while dining in Philadelphia. The entire Congress suspends operations to attend his funeral, and Thomas Jefferson assumes his vacant seat.
Okay, Captain. My first question is, what the heck is the House of Burgesses?
What do we have, Nova?
Accessing historical archives for the History of Congress series, Captain. The House of Burgesses was the first English representative government in North America. Established in Virginia in 1619, it is essentially the grandfather of the modern United States Congress.
The origins of the American legislation. Before 1619, the Virginia colony, centered around Jamestown, was run entirely by a governor appointed by the Virginia Company in London under strict martial law. To encourage more settlement and often the colony more appealing, and make the colony more appealing, the company decided to give the colonists a voice in their own local laws. They created a General Assembly, which eventually split into two chambers, mirroring the British Parliament. The Governor's Council, the upper house consisting of wealthy, prominent men appointed by the royal governor, and the House of Burgesses, the lower house consisting of representatives called burgesses, elected by the landowning men of the colony. Training ground for the Revolution. While it started as a way to handle local issues like tobacco prices and Native American relations, the House of Burgesses became the crucible where the ideology of the American Revolution was forged. Because Virginia was the largest and wealthiest colony, its legislature had immense influence. By the 1760s and 1770s, it was populated by a who's who of future founding fathers. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and Peyton Randolph all served as burgesses. When the British Parliament began imposing direct taxes like the Stamp Act, it was in the House of Burgesses that Patrick Henry delivered his famous fiery speeches declaring that only Virginians had the right to tax Virginians. The transition to independence. In 1774, the royal governor Lord Dunmore became so infuriated by the Burgesses' rebellious resolutions that he formally dissolved the assembly and locked them out of the capital in Williamsburg. Instead of going home, the delegates simply walked down the street to the Raleigh Tavern, reconvened, and voted to call for a United Continental Congress to coordinate with the other colonies. Pretty sure that's the meeting that Samuel Adams locked the doors to.
I remember that. Bad guy sat outside decreeing to no one. Captain, I'm getting something on my HUD. What was the Pistolfi dispute of 1753, and what's it got to do with Peyton Randolph?
Captain, accessing historical records on the Pistolfi dispute. This controversy is one of the most critical, yet frequently overlooked, precursors to the American Revolution. Occurring over a decade before the Stamp Act, it dealt with the exact same core issue: taxation without representation.
The conflict. In 1752, Virginia's royal lieutenant governor, Robert Dinwiddie, decided to start charging a fee for one pistole, a Spanish gold coin worth about 18 shillings, or roughly 6 days' wages for a skilled tradesman, to affix the official seal to new land patents. Dinwiddie argued this was merely an administrative fee for processing crown lands. The Virginia House of Burgesses, however, saw it differently. Because the fee was imposed unilaterally by the executive branch rather than voted on by the elected colonial assembly, the Burgesses viewed it as an illegal tax. The rallying cry in Williamsburg taverns quickly became liberty, property, and no pistole. Peyton Randolph's role. At the time, Peyton Randolph was serving as the Crown's Attorney General for Virginia, meaning his direct superior was Governor Dinwiddie. Despite this conflict of interest, the House of Burgesses selected Randolph to travel to London as their special agent to argue their case before the king's Privy Council. Furious at this insubordination, Dinwiddie immediately fired Randolph and stripped him of his position. Randolph spent months in London lobbying, writing articles, and debating the issue in local coffee houses. Ultimately, the Privy Council issued a compromise in June 1754. They upheld Dinwiddie's basic right to charge the fee, but severely limited the types of land grants it could be applied to. Crucially, the Crown also ordered Dinwiddie to reinstate Randolph as Attorney General, shaping his trajectory. The dispute profoundly altered Randolph's political destiny and perfectly positioned him for his future role in the Continental Congress, the champion of colonial rights. The mission cemented Randolph's reputation not just as a royal bureaucrat, but as a fiercely loyal defender of Virginian rights. It proved to his peers that he was willing to risk his own prestigious career and salary for the colony's constitutional principles, the diplomat. By successfully navigating the halls of power in London and securing a compromise, Randolph established himself as a brilliant moderate and a stabilizing political force. He knew how to argue firmly without resorting to radicalism, the path to the presidency. The immense trust he earned during the Pistole controversy laid the direct foundation for his future leadership. Because he proved he could stand up to royal overreach systemically and legally, his peers later elected him Speaker of the House of Burgesses in 1766 and eventually the first President of the Continental Congress in 1774. The dispute transformed Randolph from a standard Crown lawyer into one of the most trusted political leaders in America.
Captain, there's something that's been bugging me. If the Virginia Company elected the local governor of the colony, did they own the colony? What was the relationship between the Crown and the Virginia Company?
Captain, the short answer is no. The Virginia Company did not own the colony in the way a modern corporation owns a factory or a piece of real estate. They operated under a royal charter, which was essentially a massive, exclusive lease and business license granted by King James I.
Outsourcing the empire. Building an empire is incredibly expensive and highly risky. King James I claimed the North American territory by right of discovery, but he had no desire to bankrupt the royal treasury trying to settle it. Instead, he outsourced the financial risk to the Virginia Company, a joint stock company very similar to a modern publicly traded corporation funded by wealthy private investors. The company's deal. The investors fronted the money, bought the ships, hired the settlers, and managed the day-to-day operations, which included establishing the local government and appointing the colonial governor. In return, they received a monopoly on trade, land sales, and the right to exploit any resources they found. The Crown's deal. The king expanded the British Empire without spending a dime. He also explicitly wrote into the charter that the Crown would receive a 20% cut of any gold or silver the company extracted. Ultimate sovereignty. Even though the company's head of directors appointed the governor and managed the settlement, the king maintained ultimate sovereignty over the territory. The colonists legally remained English subjects, bound by English common law. The company was merely a corporate middleman managing the king's geopolitical asset. If the company violated the terms of the contract, the king could revoke it at any time. The king steps in 1624. The Virginia Company proved to be terrible at managing the colony. Between rampant starvation, disease, financial ruin, and a devastating coordinated attack by the Powhatan Confederacy in 1622, the corporate enterprise was on the brink of total collapse. In 1624, King James I had seen enough. He took the colony to court, legally dissolved the Virginia Company, and revoked their charter. Virginia immediately transitioned from a charter colony to a royal colony. From that point forward, the Crown completely cut out the corporate middlemen and began appointing the governor directly. Hilldiver.
Wait, Captain! Did that transition lead to the ultimate formation of the Continental Congress? To the revolution itself?
Not directly, Captain. In fact, that 1624 transition actually made Virginia more stable and loyal to the Crown for the next 130 years. The revolution wasn't caused by the Crown taking control in 1624. It was caused by how the Crown decided to exercise that control starting in 1763.
The era of salutary neglect. For over a century after taking direct control, the British government practiced an unwritten policy called salutary neglect. The Crown essentially said, as long as you export raw materials to us, buy British manufactured goods, and stay loyal, we will leave you alone to run your own internal affairs. Because London was 3,000 miles away, the royal governors heavily relied on local assemblies like the House of Burgesses to manage day-to-day operations, build roads, and, most importantly, levy local taxes. Generations of colonists grew up believing that local self-rule was their birthright as Englishmen. The catalyst, the French and Indian War. The breaking point arrived in 1763. Britain won the massive global 7 Years' War, known in North America as the French and Indian War, but the victory nearly bankrupted the royal treasury. King George III and Parliament looked at the massive debt and decided it was time for the American colonies to start paying for their own defense. They ended salutary neglect and began imposing direct taxes on the colonies without consulting the local assemblies. The collision between the Crown's sudden assertion of authority and the colonists' deeply ingrained expectation of self-rule was the true catalyst. When the king eventually dissolved the House of Burgesses for protesting these taxes, the colonial leaders simply took the governing skills they had learned there and used them to form the first Continental Congress in 1774.
That helps me put the pieces together, Captain. When it comes to Randolph, I'm aware that his failing health ended his time with the Second Continental Congress, and I think I understand why he was chosen. Were there any noteworthy achievements he could be credited with during his first and only full term as president?
Captain, it is important to contextualize just how brief that first term was. Peyton Randolph presided over the First Continental Congress for exactly 47 days, from September 5th to October 22nd, 1774. However, because that term encompassed the entirety of the First Continental Congress, his achievements are effectively the foundational achievements of the American government. As the presiding officer, he didn't draft these resolutions himself, but he orchestrated the fragile consensus required to pass them among delegates who deeply distrusted each other. Here are the most noteworthy achievements of his term.
1. The Continental Association. This was the most practically impactful achievement of 1774. Congress passed a unified, colonial-wide economic boycott of British goods. Crucially, the association didn't just ask people to stop buying British tea and cloth, it mandated that creation of local committees of safety and inspection in every town to enforce the boycott and publicly shame violators. The impact. This was the first time the 13 colonies acted as a single unified economic bloc. It also effectively created a shadow government of local committees that would later become the backbone of the Patriot War effort. 2. The Declaration and Resolves. Under Randolph's gavel, the Congress produced a comprehensive legal document outlining their grievances against King George III and Parliament. It formally claimed that colonists were entitled to the rights of life, liberty, and property, and that the British legislature had no authority over them without their consent. The impact. It laid the direct philosophical and legal groundwork for the Declaration of Independence that would be written 2 years later. Endorsing the Suffolk Resolves. This was the most radical action Congress took under Randolph. Drafted in Massachusetts by Dr. Joseph Warren and rushed to Philadelphia by Paul Revere, the Suffolk Resolves aggressively rejected the British coercive acts, urged citizens to withhold taxes, and advised colonial towns to begin arming their local militias. The impact. By formally endorsing this document, Randolph and the Congress signaled that they were not just going to write political letters of protest, that they were officially backing armed, localized resistance. 4. Forging the institution of Congress. Randolph's greatest personal achievement was keeping the room together. The delegates in 1774 were a volatile mix of radical firebrands like Samuel Adams, who wanted immediate action, and wealthy conservatives like Joseph Galloway, who desperately wanted to reconcile with the king. Randolph used his immense respect and moderate temperament to keep these factions from abandoning the project entirely. He also established the foundational precedents of how Congress operates, including the tradition of open legislative sessions with a prayer, which remains in practice to this day. Ultimately, Peyton Randolph's crowning achievement was proving that 13 distinct, fiercely independent colonies could successfully function as a united political body.
That's a fair contribution to the story, I would say. Bad news, Captain. I don't think we have an upload station here in the zone. I'm going to finish up here and then call for evac.
Sounds good, Helldiver. Once you're back on board, we'll check for another upload site. Our goal is to review and understand Congress. We would be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't stop and check on anything related along the way. Next week, we're going to stay in the 1770s and continue to look closer at the transition from the Continental Congress to drafting the Constitution. Until Friday, Helldivers, for Super Earth, for real Earth, for all of us.
Something!
Extraction is available.
Dropping a pin.
Helldiver, you are moving outside the mission area.
Found something! Found something.
Automaton outpost destroyed.
Tagging map.
Extraction is available. Objective critical stratagem available. Objective critical stratagem no longer available. Extraction when ready.
Mag's empty.
Hell bomb request approved. Deploying now.
Hellbomb armed. Clear the area.
Wow. That was a son. That was a husband of the
Found something. Dropping a pin.
Extraction is available. Deploying equipment package.
and the stuff they say is fucking dumb.
Extraction shuttle inbound. Sending down support weapon.
Freedom forever!
ETA T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds. ETA T-minus 1 minute. 30 seconds. ETA T-minus 20 seconds. Reinforcement budget depleted. ETA T-minus 10 seconds. Clear landing zone. Pelican 1 approaching pickup. Pelican 1 landing in progress. Pelican 1 preparing to depart. Shuttle launch in 20 seconds. Extraction complete. Pelican 1 beginning ascent.
You have proven beyond doubt the mettle of the Helldivers.
Huh? Oh, we.
They don't know yet. And
Yeah.
you express this disbelief and this horror. When he was at the casino, once he came back from the bathroom, it was like hysterics. I thought somebody had attacked her in the bathroom or something. She tells me her name. I was like, what are you talking about?
Monty just lost her house. Someone's sticking a microphone in your face. Asking you about this. Do you have anything to do with it?
You're talking to me and asking me with me. And I told everyone the truth. I had nothing to hide. I had nothing.
Yeah, not in your face.
Devastation and working everything you did.
You can tell he's looking
Police
at it.
investigators, the fire department, the ATM.
Why he always got sprinting on his face?
The dude.
Yeah. He have like bumps on his face. Every picture is like a sprint or something on his
A
face.
lot of mathematical calculations